Two new signings, a heating up draft debate, and the Bengals potentially heading international. We'll talk about that and more on today's episode of Bengals Daily, part of the Fan Arch Podcast Network. My name is Dave Olson. I'll be your host today for your final episode of the week, Friday, April 3rd. And as a fun fact for April 3rd, I always like to lead us off with a little bit of a fun fact. Doris Day was born in Cincinnati, Ohio on April 3rd, 1922, a bit before my time. She said this, and I quote, "I could have lived happily my entire life in Cincinnati, married to a proper Cincinnatian, living in a big old Victorian house." Instead, she became one of the biggest stars in Hollywood history. But Cincinnati has that effect, doesn't it? Ropes you in, pulls you in, makes you want to stay there. It's a charming town. Just like the Bengals pulled in Kyle Duggar. That'll be our first topic for today. So the Bengals announcing a signing of safety Kyle Duggar, a second-round pick out of New England back in 2020, about halfway through the year last year in 2025, getting traded over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Funnily enough, that was just in time for Kyle Duggar to make a 73-yard pick six off of Joe Flacco happen. But now he's joined the Bengals, so he returns to Cincinnati, but in stripes this time. We'll stick with PFF grades on this one. So a 53.2 PFF grade. 82nd is how that ranks at a 98 safety. So certainly bottom third of the league. Not the best coverage grade. So I say temper expectations, but I think what this allows more for is some versatility. I think you look at what Kyle Duggar does, how Kyle Duggar plays the game of football, how Jordan Battle plays the game of football, how Brian Cook plays the game of football. All of that feels a little different, right? And so I think that's the most important thing to look at here with this signing. It's not the star-studded, going to jump in, start right away, take over this room. But you're looking at Jordan Battle, who's a great free safety, about 70% of his snaps, 68 to be exact, in 2025 with the free safety position. And he actually did pretty well when he played there. The issue is when Jordan Battle runs downfield into the box, that's where Jordan Battle is missing tackles and started to become a liability. Of course, Geno Stone fell prey to moments like that as well. And so on the other side, you look at Brian Cook, a little bit different, more interchangeable. He's a great strong safety, plays in the box well. He had an 83-ish PFF grade, which was third among safeties last year. This is Brian Cook, and an 80 run defense grade. So that tells us that Cook can do both. He can play deep, he can play in the box, can play the defense well. And so that's how Brian Cook played in Kansas City. The issue was last year, the Bengals had they had two safeties essentially doing the same thing, right? You had Jordan Battle playing back, missing tackles, doing okay. The issue was you also had Geno Stone, who's playing back, doing terribly, missing tackles. And so I think this adds maybe a new chess piece into the rotation. So it's not going to be this hyper impactful, suddenly your defense is the best in the league, but it adds some flexibility for Al Golden, and I think that's what I get excited about with this signing. So there's three safeties. You get slightly different skill sets with each of them. And so it opens the doors a little bit. I think more than anything else, you're talking about a safety room that elevates from one of the worst in the league. Now you add Brian Cook, and I already think that elevated it to an above-average safety room. Kyle Duggar, even as just a rotational piece, I think raises that floor even a little bit more. I love this signing by the Bengals. Again, you have to look at the cost of this signing. It's a one-year deal by Cincinnati, so ultimately it's pretty low risk. And you had a player who can play free safety, play box safety, In slot corner, I think that's something I would be remiss if I didn't mention. Also plays slot corner a little bit. And so you can fill in for either starter. You can cover slot receivers if that's what Al Golden wants to do on that play. Or you can send a blitz off the edge with Kyle Duggar. And so I think it's sort of a utility knife, jack of all trades, master of none type player. And I think we had safeties last year playing off of one another who were jack of no trades, also master of none. And so I think this is a great floor-raising move by the Cincinnati Bengals after a quiet week 2, 3 of the offseason of free agency. The Bengals have now started to make a little bit of noise again. Still quiet. This is a low rumble. I'm not hanging the banner yet, but these are the types of moves that Bengals fans have been asking for. So a big thumbs up from me on the Kyle Duggar signing. Does it take Downs off the board, though? That's really the question. That's why that's the headline down at the bottom of my screen there. Tough to say. Full stop. You want me to answer black and white? No, of course not. No. If Caleb Downs is there, I think the Bengals will seriously consider that. As with all of this draft talk, it depends who else is there. We'll talk about Sonny Styles a little bit later on in this show. Jermod McCoy's had a great now pro day after missing a season due to injury, but has some great tape from 2024. Delane from LSU has started to rise a little bit. Bengals may be shifting their eyes towards cornerback. Ruben Bain, if Ruben Bain is, so there's, the Bengals are in this interesting spot where if the early portion of the draft goes their way, you could have to decide between 2 or 3 of these players. But if nothing else, I think this type of signing and the signing we're going to talk about in a second with Jasir Taylor adds a little bit of flexibility, if nothing else. So no, if the question is, will the Bengals ignore Downs if Downs is in there at 10? No, of course not. The Bengals would consider that pick if Caleb Downs is there, especially depending on who else is around. But does it make Downs a must pick? Don't know. We've heard some rumblings on a Jordan Battle extension as well. We'll see. But no, Caleb Downs is absolutely still on the board for the Cincinnati Bengals at the 10th overall pick. We talk about flexibility. Our second signing to discuss here is Jasir Taylor. Cornerback, largely played with the Chargers. I believe was drafted to the Chargers in 2022 out of Wake Forest. Just last year got traded to the Jets in November. Not a great season from Jasir Taylor last year. This is a good rotation piece again for the Bengals. 41 PFF grade last year. Tons of special team snaps, though. I think that's a big takeaway here. The Bengals lost Tyson Anderson a few weeks ago to Denver. Not the type of loss that's going to win you or lose you the Super Bowl. But you feel it, you feel it when you have a special teams player like that who's out there a lot and does a good job. You've seen teams lose games because of special teams. So filling those gaps as best you can is helpful. I think Jasir Taylor has an option to make an impact on the special teams side of the football. And also on the actual defensive side of the ball, I think that this is a depth and rotational piece. Talk a little bit about Duggar potentially being able to rotate in depending where needed in some coverage roles. But Dax Hill and DJ Turner still the 1-2 punch at corner for the Cincinnati Bengals. Another low-cost, low-expectation type signing. I like it. Add some depth, raise the floor. This is nothing but a good thing. Adding to your room is never a bad thing, in my opinion. If nothing else, it creates a little bit more competition. I think this is interesting, though, when I start to consider the draft. I didn't feel super swayed by, I don't know. Maybe I was feeling a little swayed. I mean, if Caleb Downs is there, the Bengals will, of course, consider Downs. But I say that because I am not at all swayed by cornerback plans by this signing. the reality is if cornerback is the play, Jasir Taylor being signed to the Bengals is not gonna change whether or not the Bengals draft Jermod McCoy or Mansour Delane at number 10 overall. If those two players are there and that's the plan for the Bengals, that is not going to be affected by this signing at all. So I think this is a nice glue piece for the Bengals. Good rotational piece. And the Bengals still have a little bit of cap space to play around with. And so it's a minimal impact type signing, but adds a little flexibility and a veteran presence. I mean, this is a player who's now been in the league for 3 or 4 years. You got a lot of rookies on that defensive side of the ball. Let's create some competition in camp and see what these players can get done. Now, one of the positions we haven't talked about at all in free agency, and this is something that fans have been really upset about, is linebacker. Because the Bengals knew going into this offseason that linebacker was a massive need. Let me rephrase this. Bengals fans felt like going into this offseason, linebacker was a massive need. You had 2 of the worst linebackers in the NFL last year. Statistically, there was an improvement. I mentioned that on our last episode. There was an improvement. But was it enough to hinge your defensive hopes on? Zach Taylor potentially thought so in his interview, but I'm not sure what else a coach is going to say. But I still wanted to see the Bengals make a move in free agency. Even one of these, low cost, 1 year, bring in a veteran, someone to anchor the defensive side of the football type signings. Bengals have not, to this point, done so. So that turns my eyes towards the draft. Maybe that's where it'll get addressed. Caleb Downs, certainly an option. Jermod McCoy, as we mentioned. Delane, cornerback, certainly an option. Ruben Bain, we'll talk about Bain as a prospect on this podcast, an option. Maybe the Bengals, though, hoping that one of the linebacker prospects falls to them at number 10 overall, and that could be Sonny Styles out of Ohio State. This guy's a freak. So when I say 4th best, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the lower third, 4th best linebacker since 1987. That is the raw athletic score. So in the last 40 years, this is the 4th most freakish linebacker we've seen test. So that is right up the Bengals' alley, right? Athletic freak. Here's the good news. The other half is also there for a player like Sonny Styles. This is not a player who is an athletic freak, but has 0 production. 82 tackles, 7 of them for a loss, first-team All-American, and was a serious leader on defense this past season for Ohio State. At the Combine, 4.46 40, 43.5-inch vertical, 11'2" broad jump. The 4.46 40 means something to me. Admittedly, the vertical and the broad jump, I don't know. You can jump high, you can jump far. It might be good for an interception or two. The linebacker position. That is a 9.99 out of 10 on the raw athletic score scale, which, again, 4th best for a linebacker since 1987. I love the Gridiron Grading guys. If you get a chance, go check out their Twitter account. They do a lot of great analytics. I would love Gridiron Grading to just draft for the Bengals. They had Sonny Styles as their consensus number 8 overall pick in general, with one of the highest competition ratings, while also being one of the best Gridiron graded scorers of this class. An elite defender on their metrics. Here's the issue, though, with Sonny Styles. Most Bengals fans would be thrilled getting this pick. I'm not sure if Styles is going to fall. I think this is the type of pick someone like the Giants could be hoping for. Giants need some help in the middle of their defense as well. It's where a lot of mock drafts have Sonny Styles going. So that's where the concern starts to fall for me, where you look at free agency, what this team's needs are. You want to put yourself in a position to draft whoever is there and feel happy about it. I think the Bengals in the last couple of days have taken steps to get there. I would hate for them to feel like they're screwed, right, if they don't get a linebacker in round 1. Now, there are some great prospects in round 2. It's funny, right? The Bengals double dip in linebacker last year in a really weak linebacker class. And now you've got great linebacker prospects in all of the early rounds. So I'm actually not worried. I think the Bengals will look towards that position in one of their first 3 picks. Could be Sonny Styles. I would love it if it were Sonny Styles. And honestly, I would feel like it was a great offseason at that point. Quietly, though, I think the Bengals have actually started to add some really good pieces. I think it's a really weak defense from last year. You've started to shore up some of those weaknesses. You brought in some veteran presence. Now you've added a couple of these 1 year, let's hope it works out type signings, good rotational pieces, Swiss Army knife type players. You are opening yourself up to being a bit more flexible in the draft. And so Sonny Styles could be a pick with that 10th overall pick. And I think most Bengals fans would be happy about that because we need some help at linebacker. Could come in the rest of free agency, could come in the draft. Plenty more draft prospects to talk about, but Sonny Styles, one of the best ones. Let's round out the show with another fun topic, going global. At the owners' meeting out in Arizona this week, Mike North, who is the NFL scheduling director, spoke to Bengals.com directly, and I'm going to run a few quotes by you here. Quote, he's been vocal about it. I believe this talking about Joe Burrow. I remember he was pretty disappointed last year when you guys, meaning the Bengals, didn't go. And I think that's a real possibility for the Bengals this year, meaning playing internationally. Another quote, certainly they are a candidate to go play Washington in London, and certainly a candidate to go play Atlanta in Madrid. They've got one of the best fan bases, thanks in large part to the quarterback, that resonates in Europe and across the planet. So the Bengals haven't played internationally since 2019, which was Zach Taylor's first year. They played the Rams in London. The Bengals fell to 0-8 after that game, unfortunately. So the poor London fans haven't seen the Bengals UK squad that we've got. Haven't had a good Bengals game out in London in 7 years. So could happen. We know who the opponents would be, right? We already know that Washington is playing in London. We know that Atlanta is playing in Madrid. We don't know who their opponents are yet. Now the schedule will get released sometime after the draft. But when you get these little nuggets, it does start to raise the eyebrows a little bit. Of course, the NFL is starting to expand its international slate a little bit. 9 total games, 3 of which are in London this year. You got Madrid, I believe an Australia game, Mexico City, Munich, Paris, and then down in Brazil, you're going to have a Rio de Janeiro game down there as well. So the Bengals could play internationally. This is something that Joe Burrow has been asking for in the last couple of years. Really interested in seeing more of Europe and playing some football out there. Around the league, the most likely matchup people are thinking could be Bengals versus Washington in London, which I think, if I'm scratching my Bengals brain a little bit, the Bengals played Washington in London in 2016 and tied them. I think that was a game the Bengals tied, which would be funny. Burrow versus Jaden Daniels. We know how that turned out a couple years ago. I would love to see that game. Either way, in my opinion, if it's one of the away games, obviously that would be ideal. I think that's how it works. This is a really silly comment for me. I assume the teams that have already been announced to be playing internationally are teams whose home games are being played internationally. Atlanta, I know we would be playing in Atlanta. Not sure about Washington. Doesn't matter. Either way, we could be playing Washington in London. Secretly, as an Atlanta-based Bengals fan, I hope that it's not the Falcons game, because this is the closest I'll ever be able to going to a Bengals game rather than driving or flying to Cincinnati. So I hope it's the Washington game, but if it's the Falcons game in Madrid, that could be fun too. Man, the offseason's really starting to heat up, isn't it? The Bengals add a couple of free agent picks. The Bengals could be playing internationally, and some really great prospects starting to potentially unfold for the Cincinnati Bengals. There's a lot to look forward to next week. We're going to be discussing some of the biggest positions of need. Maybe linebacker, maybe edge, maybe the entire defense. We're going to be talking about some of the best prospects in the draft to fill those positions. Can the Bengals trade up? Can they trade down? Do a mock draft or two? Plenty on the slate for this offseason in the 3 weeks on our lead up to the 2026 NFL Draft. I can't wait. All that's going to be happening right here on Bengals Daily, part of the Fan Arch Podcast Network. My name is Dave Olson, and I'll catch you next time.